Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the first online all-party parliamentary group blockchain. Absolutely delighted to be chairing this evening's meeting. Can I just first of all say I appreciate this is a very difficult time for everybody, not just home here in the UK, but across the world in terms of the coronavirus, and our thoughts and prayers are with those who are in hospital, those who have lost loved ones, and critically they are with those doing the fight on the front line in the health services and support services across the world. My name is Martin Docherty-Hughes. I'm a Member of Parliament for West Dunbartonshire, and I have the joy and the privilege of being the chair of the all-party parliamentary group. And this evening I just want to make a few brief introductions. I'm going to ask Dr. Birgitte Andersen just to say a few words. Birgitte, over to you.
Yes, thank you very much. We are very delighted everybody could join the meeting here. Clearly right now we would normally be in Parliament with about 80 to 100 people around the round table, but now we are online, and I've heard we are a lot more than what we would be in the packed room in Parliament, so clearly this is very exciting. I also want to say that everybody should be aware of this here is clearly a full production to move something physical to online. So we are very happy and would like to thank you for how agile everybody has been, both the chair, the vice chairs, the evidence givers, the sponsors, the audience, etc. So it looks like clearly we're all here to continue. There are people who are also online who never ever attended anything in Parliament of our all-party parliamentary groups. So just for you to know what this is all about, what we're doing here, because we have a global audience here. Clearly, we are trying to align the technological opportunity around blockchain with the responses from industry, from businesses, from citizens, from government, and from Parliament, and from regulators, so we can all kind of move in sync. And therefore, these meetings are very important for this purpose. And we look forward to hear, of course, what the evidence givers have to say. So I want to stop here, but I want to thank everybody for being part, and I'm sure that this, even if it's online, it's not going to be any less.
Thank you very much, Birgitte. Can I just say thank you to everyone at the Big Innovation Centre for pulling this together at such short notice and keeping us active and keeping the issue of blockchain distributed ledger technology relevant to everything that's going on in the world today. We'll progress because I know that everyone is in tight time schedules and probably some are in different time zones, and it's important to set out how we're going to progress. I'll do some brief introductions to our speakers as I introduce them. They will present. We will eventually have a Q&A, but can I just also remind our speakers, if you would mute your speaker or your microphone once you've completed, that makes it a far easier process. So first of all, I'm going to introduce Stewart Jeacocke from the Network Development and Customs Lead from TradeLens. Stewart's an associate partner in IBM's service division. He's currently part of the TradeLens management team, which is global. Blockchain enabled, and the platform that lays the foundation of the digital supply chains. He's over 10 years of experience delivering technology enabled solutions for international trade and compliance. And I'm going to hand over to you, Stewart.
Okay, thanks very much, Martin. So as Martin was saying, I've been involved with TradeLens since its inception, when IBM started to work with Maersk on a global blockchain platform for trade. More recently, other large shipping lines like MSC and Hapag-Lloyd have also agreed to join TradeLens as foundational members. Elsewhere, IBM is engaged with over 400 clients from across all industries, building the blockchain networks of the future. And we're a leading contributor to the open source Hyperledger Fabric blockchain platform. We provide our clients with the consulting, systems integration, and blockchain technology that they need to design and adopt distributed ledgers, digital identity, blockchain solutions, and consortia. So if you cast your mind back 64 years ago, next month in fact, on April 26, 1956, a revolution began when the first container ship, the Ideal X, set sail from Newark in New Jersey. The shipping container has gone on to become the building block of today's globalized economy and global logistics. Yet as supply chains have lengthened, they've grown long on data but short on trust. So by helping to restore trust, we believe blockchain has the potential to have as much impact on logistics as the shipping container did. Cargo owners are demanding greater visibility into every step of the logistics journey. The procurement of transport services is still too manual. It requires lots of phone calls and effort to correct errors. Mistrust among organizations has impeded data sharing, and even when that data is shared, it's not fully trusted. So to solve these challenges, we're seeing the emergence of shared global industry platforms that optimize business-to-business processes. And blockchain provides these platforms with a technology that helps to establish trust through mechanisms such as immutability, consensus, and smart contracts. A really good case in point is TradeLens. TradeLens is a blockchain-enabled platform that lays the foundation for digital supply chains. It's a global platform that connects together all the organizations involved in the logistics process, enabling them to collaborate, to publish and subscribe logistics events and documents. And it provides a shared global view of transactions without compromising privacy or confidentiality. So last year, in 2019, TradeLens tracked more than 20 million containers, and that will increase dramatically this year as we've agreed with additional large ocean carriers like MSC, CMA, Hapag-Lloyd, ONE, and Zim, that they will participate in TradeLens, and they're in the process of integrating with that platform. So TradeLens shows that blockchain's impact on logistics is not any longer a theoretical thing. It's already having an impact. Other areas of logistics in which we expect to see significant benefit from blockchain include things like the procurement of transport services, the transfer of title through things like bills of lading, improvements in the ability to prove chain of custody, and also anti-counterfeiting measures. So our experience is that blockchain dramatically improves the efficiency in logistics, but we also believe that it's going to have an even greater impact in areas like improving the end customer experience and in enabling entirely new business models that don't currently exist in the logistics ecosystem. According to an IBM survey of 1,600 executives across 8 industries, about a third of those executives are reallocating massive capital, which we estimate to be about, in total, $1.2 trillion, to launch new platform business models. So what should government do in this kind of environment? Well, I'd advocate that they need to engage collaboratively with these platforms, not in several years once they're ubiquitous, but right now. You need to help shape their evolution so that they meet the needs of governments as well as the private sector. And specifically, what could that engagement actually look like? Well, if we take platforms like TradeLens as an example, companies that are using them will have greatly increased end-to-end supply chain security. And this means that they pose a lower risk to the importing country. So governments could consider offering green lanes to companies that make use of these platforms, as well as meeting more common trusted trader criteria. And these green lanes would simplify the customs compliance process for the companies while still maintaining compliance, and also enable government to direct your resources to controlling higher risk trade. So hopefully that's given you a flavor of how we see blockchain working in logistics, how we're already doing work with blockchain in TradeLens, and how we certainly would welcome additional engagement from the government to help shape how these kind of platforms evolve over the future. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much indeed, Stewart, and I'm sure there'll be plenty of questions for you as we come to our closure. And just to remind everyone who's listening, if you want to make a question, you should have a Q&A button at the bottom of your screen, or if you're like me on an iPad, it'll be at the top. Do please type away. I'm going to also now introduce Dr. Jacob Bejoy, Head of Centre of Excellence Blockchain and AI at Deutsche Post, DHL. As the group head, COE of Blockchain AI at Deutsche Post, enables Deutsche Post to pioneer blockchain priorities in logistics and finance space, and has worked with partners in setting up industry consortiums in logistics and the finance space, and is also an industry supervisor and advisor for industry in innovation. So over to you, sir.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. It's a privilege to be in this forum today, to particularly hear from the industry experts and also from the government to see how we can jointly explore opportunities and see how we can deliver results for the industry. Let me introduce myself. I am Bejoy Jacob. I run the group blockchain practice for DHL. We as DHL, as you know, runs across 4 major streams of business and logistics: air, ocean, road, and rail. So our blockchain practices, or blockchain research and development, is always focused on cross-industry and multimodal transportation. We span across 220 countries, and we have landing rights of over 90% of all the airports in the world. So which gives us a very good opportunity to influence the industry as market leader. We started the blockchain practice or blockchain research 3-4 years ago, when the finance industry started looking at blockchain or cryptocurrency as a solution for the markets. We worked very closely with companies in the market on finance space, found out that yes, blockchain was an unstable practice, but there's a huge traction which is coming in the next decade. And that's where we spend more time on researching on the business practices and business areas. We work quite closely with a lot of our ocean carriers, air carriers, trucking companies, and also cross-border traffic, whether air or ocean. When we look at practices in the blockchain, right? So we see few areas. Everybody talks about track and trace. Track and trace is the easiest part to go. But when we see a business tangibility or a use case for an operational business, we have to think about cases where value creation comes in place. This is where operational improvements, business operational practices has to be influenced. Secondly, we have to look at places where there is immediacy of data and results are needed. Completely decentralized data, and this is the key. Parties in many researches we have seen in the industry that counterparts are very hesitant to share data. There's secured data in public places or even third-party suppliers. So we need to give them an opportunity to host their own data while they are able to interoperate or intercommunicate with parties. We call it the whisper, that is two-party communication, and we call it the announce, when it's multi-party communication in a shipment chain. So that's one. Second thing is we need to look at financial settlements. It's at the end of the day, everything ends up in dollars and cents. So it leads to the books. So how can we influence, particularly invoice processing, transparency of invoice processing? How can we influence customer clarification easily? And what are the immutable data that you have from the time of shipment or ordering to the time of proof of delivery? What are the activities? For example, if there's a demurrage on detention, if there is additional barging requirements, or if there is any additional service in the ground operations, do we have that information? How can we give this information, the tangibility of this information, to our customers so that they are well pleased to say, yeah, this is an extra service and I'm able to settle soon. So that brings the turnaround time of settlements much shorter. Okay, and then comes the regulatory and the customs. And I think this is where the government can play a big role, introducing more of services and knowledge to the regulators. How can we introduce our customs services, border security controls, more tangible information? PDF files has been the latest innovation in the recent times for customs documentation. And if you look at markets, exploring markets, exploring new technology, for example, Singapore, Dubai, they are far ahead of the game to say, I have immutable data which I can share on demand. Proof of origin, certificate of origin, proof of details. Then we also heard from Stewart about how can we create the certification and handover of certification easily, and how can it be tangible. If we really look at bill of lading as a use case, many people have seen bill of lading as a use case for the future, but regulators can influence this bill of lading use case to go much faster. On the whole, DHO's aim is not a profit-making solution, but we aim at giving value to the customer while giving a complete not-for-profit service structure. That means the network, the ecosystem that we introduce should be open to all and able to connect to all. That means interoperability, blockchain to blockchain, into blockchain, blockchain to non-blockchain, and also app-based services for truckers. For example, truckers are not going to host a node for themselves. There are small truckers with two trucks and a table and a chair. So how do we help them? If they have an app, how do we integrate this party into the network? Because we want to be inclusive. We want to set the industry a standard or help the industry to have a standard in practice. These are the main areas for us. Interoperability being the key. Standardization, how can we influence and help the standardization in the industry? Blockchain to non-blockchain connectivity, and also sharing data, relevant data for the right parties while you hold the data in your own space.
I keep forgetting to unmute myself. It's not like a politician to do that. Can I say, first of all, thank you very much for that. And we're going to move on swiftly. I know that Diarmuid O'Riordan may be with us. I can't see you visually, Diarmuid, but I think you might be with us online.
I am indeed. I'm here. Yep.
That's a good man. Thank you very much, Diarmuid. Diarmuid is a co-founder and director of Ping Assets Limited. He's worked in R&D, consultant with a number of different industries, mainly computer systems, biotech, and advanced materials. I studied genetic medicine in spare time at Cambridge, and is here to do a presentation on behalf of Ping. So over to you, Diarmuid.
Okay, thank you. I'm just going to share my screen there. I just have a handful of slides. There's not too many there. Okay, right. Yeah, so just, yeah, my name is Diarmuid O'Riordan. Kind of, thanks for having me here today. I'd be one of the founders of Ping Asset. For the last kind of 15 years, I would have worked as an R&D consultant within a number of different industries, kind of mainly computer systems and advanced materials. I suppose just a bit of background on Ping itself. We spun out of a company called RM2 Limited, who did RM2 be listed on the AIM exchange. What RM2 do is they manufacture composite pallets. They're kind of made of like 80% fiberglass, kind of 20% composite, manufactured kind of use protrusion. So basically what happened was these pallets kept on getting lost. They'd like kind of loss rates up to about 25%. And clearly this wasn't a sustainable business model. So what happened was a small kind of team of us got together, and we developed a kind of low powered tracking solution to monitor the pallets. At that point then it kind of became fairly evident that a lot of the companies that actually take these pallets into their networks, they saw kind of other opportunities within their own supply chains to monitor different assets, a whole kind of range of different things. So what we did was from that, we kind of spun out a little company, formed Ping Asset, and we've been, I guess, kind of, you know, offering solutions to supply chain with about 5 years or so, tracking various things. So if you just take a look at the screen, that would be one of the pallets. Essentially what we have is a device that we embed into the corner of one of the legs, and then basically jump onto the next slide so quickly. So this then would be the device itself. It's very small. It's kind of like, I don't know how you kind of compare it. It's possibly like the box of cigarettes is probably roughly the same kind of size. Like, so just to give you kind of an idea of the device itself. So what all it does is it kind of wakes up. Once it wakes up, it basically kind of sniffs the network location, so Wi-Fi and cellular network. And then what we do is we kind of send a packet off. We retrieve that in a kind of secure cloud system, and then we kind of, what we do is we feed data into different companies and systems with an API. But it just gives us kind of, it just informs us of location data, temperature, you know, shock events, things like that. So so if you can kind of jump on there to the next slide, you'll get, you know, you get a kind of quick overview of the temperature monitoring with the device itself. This is just a trip. It'll be a unit inside a pharmaceutical company over in the Bay, and it's basically tracking kind of location data across the supply chain there. So this stuff, you know, it helps kind of inform these companies of various events like dwell time, so they can start mapping out dwell time per location, so they'll know that they've got, let's say, for instance, it could be a ventilator. So a ventilator is kind of dwell time within a hospital. How long have they been there? You know, and then what you can do is you can kind of check the amount of assets that are kind of across various locations nationally. So you can kind of take that data, and then you can start to kind of optimize your routing and your logistics and stuff, and then actually just optimize the network as a whole. So you've got inventory across as many nodes as you kind of can. So I guess kind of what we're doing with that data is we're kind of sending it to the blockchain, or I suppose more specifically would be IOTA's distributed ledger, Tangle. So the Tangle kind of provides us with essentially a single version of truth for logistics and transportation companies. You know, having a shared and immutable ledger is starting to become quite important for a lot of supply chains. And if you look at the FDA's Drug Supply Chain Security Act, it's essentially calling on the pharma industry to maintain secure and verifiable accounts of drugs within the supply chain. So they have to be able to kind of maintain an audited account of track and trace within their own supply chain. So it's yeah, I guess it's kind of starting to become very, very important. So I'm just going to kind of skip down there again. That'll be kind of the stack, I guess. Really, we have hardware at the lower level and connectivity. We're connected over the AT&T. It's a private network, so it's the LTE-M network that we use. And then what we do is we push that data onto the kind of distributed ledger that IOTA maintain. And then kind of anywhere from there, we can kind of maintain federated nodes. And then what we can do is we can kind of push data onto different blockchains and systems from there. Just a kind of quick one, I guess, on a use case that we're working on. Essentially what you have there at the bottom, you'd have a distributed ledger. In this case, it'd be the Tangle. So what we do is there's devices pushing data up to the Tangle, where it's kind of notarized and secured. And from that, then you'll have various actors within the supply chain that are all tapping into the Tangle. You know, they all maintain a shared node between them. So in the first case, we see the pallet pooler be the OEM. So that pooler basically has the device embedded inside the pallet. So what we can do is we can ring fence the wholesalers, the retailers, the distributors, the zones and locations. And what generally the way the business model works is the OEM will have a rental model going. So every time the pallet moves from A to B, a cost is incurred. So what we can do is ring fence B, and then once all of the pallets arrive into B, it triggers an alert, and we can kind of take that alert and push it onto something like a chain link Oracle, where what we can kind of automate and inform smart contracts, and then you can get kind of instantaneous payment between the supplier and the pallet pooler. So that's kind of one use case that we're looking at the moment. I guess with that one, it's really interesting because that's kind of, I guess, base layer one of the smart contract and supply chain itself. We can start kind of building on top of that process itself. So that's something that we're kind of excited about. So that's, I guess, kind of really kind of simple use case. You know, I guess what can government do to kind of maybe to sum it up and possibly be a little bit direct. We had a phone call kind of late Friday night from a company, fairly large multinational that work in the defense and security industry. So they're kind of trying to work with UK government to get some projects off the ground. We've been kind of involved in one of them. So they're essentially looking to start tracking things like ventilators, so that they can kind of push that data onto ledgers. But what they want to do is they're kind of optimizing resources, I guess, medical equipment resources at a national and a kind of local level. So I think this kind of technology would certainly help with that use case, because it's data that can kind of inform supply chains, and it's data that can kind of inform various ledgers as well. So I'd be more than happy to send on some details about that. I think it's kind of, there's a proposal in with the Home Office at the moment, but it'd be great if we could also get some traction and support on this side of things. So thank you.
Well, thanks very much, Diarmuid. It's very much appreciated. And whilst I might not be in government, I certainly hear what you've got to say. And as a member of the UK Defence Select Committee, I'm the one who pushed for the last hybrid warfare report. And I do believe that the distributed ledger technology does have a role to play in about resource optimization within defence and security structures. So thank you very much indeed. I'm going to quickly now go on to Ahmed Zghari. I think Ahmed and Kevin are you doing individually, I believe? Yeah. And so just first of all introduce, get my notes here properly to make sure. So Ahmed and also Kevin. In terms of Kevin and Ahmed sat on the Construction Smart Contracts Committee. Consortium of stakeholders with the construction industry aims to make smart contract tools freely available, with focus on work streams, the creation of project bank accounts and speeding up cash flow payments. Ahmed Zghari is also the chair of Construction Smart Contracts. So over to you, sir.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for having us on. We were asked to come on by SAP because we've put together a committee, and we've got a number of technology partners as well as industry participants. The reason why construction related activity is on a logistics discussion is that the construction sector is primarily a logistics model to service a one-off manufacturing process, where every activity requires the coordination of people, materials, equipment, and that can last over a period of months to several years when you're talking about infrastructure projects, which is my background and Kevin's background. Just a brief primer on the construction sector, and to give you a bit of a flavour as to the problems that we're trying to address. Within Britain, it accounts for 10% of the workforce through 300,000, mostly SMEs. So the construction sector is primarily an SME activity. And historically, the sector has been one of the least productive, with the highest rates of insolvencies. It's got the highest levels of litigation, and there's very little supply chain integration. And all that results in very poor value for money, especially when you're looking at an industry that generates around £110 billion a year, of which the public sector accounts for roughly half, depending on economic activity. So the construction industry is effectively decentralized, but there's no form of coordination, and there's no common data standards or networks. So our work as the Construction Smart Contracts Committee is an industry-led blockchain R&D group. Very important that it's industry-led, not government-led, or public sector-led. And the group is seeking to encourage SMEs to increase their adoption of technology in general, because that's the first path, that's the first step on the ladder up to improving productivity overall. And we're building off some really good work that was done by government initiatives to just improve this sector overall. So we've been looking that the construction sector has gone through a number of very well funded and thought-provoking reviews over decades, but we've never been able to maintain or sustain any kind of meaningful progress. And we think that the blockchain technology has that potential. So our work began in June 2017, and we've actually posted a video on YouTube of that first meeting, so you can see the genesis of our thinking at that time. And we divided our effort into 3 specific areas. One was problem diagnosis and evaluation, and we did a series of workshops for the first 12 months that incorporated 200 subject matter experts. So we didn't have random walks and random discussions with people that we liked. It was specifically targeted at who knows about this particular topic and what is the specific problem that we can or cannot address. Secondly, it was identification of the treatments to overcome these key issues that people felt, you know, the blockchain technology was best suited to. And then the third phase, where we have been and where we're coming to an end, is the development of an execution plan for industry adoption. So it's all well and good having an R&D and proving that blockchain is useful, but how do you then disseminate that through an industry which is largely decentralized and made up of SMEs who really don't have the bandwidth to engage in a lot of these discussions. And some of the good work that we've done, we feel it's good work that we've done has been with the help of SAP, IBM, so some of your colleagues, Stewart, we've got ARUP, so Kevin, Tata Steel, Network Rail, HS2, and we also felt that engaging with academia was important. So Cardiff University Business School has been instrumental, in particular people within the sector that know about logistics. So the next stages of our work is about taking a proof of concept which we have now completed. It tracked the life cycle of a piece of material that was designed by ARUP in a 3D model, and it went through the purchasing process and the logistics handling, or including the haulier, delivery to sites, multi-party acceptance, and then the reverse of that was the payment up the supply chain. So what we're hoping to achieve for the construction sector, which is going to be difficult, but it's paperless logistics. The sector is just fraught with paper, and paper just gets lost, and it's of new. As soon as it's signed off, it's of no use to anybody because nobody can ever find it. Tracking material ownership during delivery, so Ping actually resonates with what some of the work that we're doing. Tracking plants and equipment, so all the big bulldozers and all the equipment you see, tracking that, where is it? Most of it is rented on lease, and on big infrastructure projects there is a high degree of fraud potential because you just have so much equipment that it's very difficult to keep track of where it is and who's got it and who's paying for it. So you may end up with 10 pieces of equipment but being billed for 11. So it happens, unfortunately. One of the big areas of our target is prompt payment to SMEs, so that the smart contract nature is, if you've done these activities, we can guarantee that there will be an automated message that's signed off by multi-parties, and you will get your payments within a specific period of time that's agreed up front. It's not paying people using cryptocurrency, it's just an authorization to somebody in an accounts department to say, you don't need to question whether you need to pay this, just listen to whatever the email says. Greater transparency. So there's a lot of problems in the construction industry that people like to hide bad news, and we want to get rid of that by making data more transparent. We've got an issue about data integration, collaboration. We're hoping that blockchains and smart contracts will tease that out. And where we started really, which is by giving carrot to SMEs, which is you'll be paid on time automatically, more or less. But the only way you can do that is if you engage in the technology adoption phase. So that's a brief overview of the work that we're doing and why it's relevant to logistics. And from a government point of view, UK PLC point of view, we're one of the very few globally that are diving this deeply into the construction sector. So we're already, in terms of process, the money that the government has spent in the last 10 years on understanding the issues of what causes problems in the construction industry, coming up with some process steps that can improve that. We're building off that good work, and so having a first mover advantage in this sector, blockchain and construction, is good for export potential. I'll leave that there if that's all right. So Kevin, if you want to take over.
Thank you, Ahmed, and Kevin, on you go.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Kevin O'Grady from ARUP Business Advisory. So ARUP operate in 143 countries and 15,000 employees doing design, planning, engineering. Digital underpins sort of everything we do. And as part of that, working with Ahmed on the Construction Smart Contracts Committee. I'm also sit on the board for APPG, which is a non-for-profit blockchain looking at the real estate. So when we think about what blockchain user cases there are in logistics and transportation, one of the user cases that I quite like is the one of a cooperation of olive growers in Europe. And they use blockchain as a way to identify which olive producer out of the cooperation supplied the olives, not just in case there is a requirement to trace an individual product back to the source. We're proving that it doesn't have to be on a grand scale, that even small individuals can adopt blockchain for greater benefit of all sort of things. So following on from Ahmed's point about prompt payments to SMEs, today we saw a procurement policy notice, a PNN, titled Suppliers Relief Due to COVID-19, which is a notice to public bodies to ensure prompt payment are made and more transparency provided during this period. And blockchain actually provides that transparency. So policies and regulations are urgently required to ensure that straight and honourable dealings, such as the identified by the Cabinet Office. So now more than at any other time, we must make sure that logistics and transportation supply chains are maintained. And a quote from that actual PNN states that contracting authorities and suppliers must work collaboratively to ensure that transparency during this period. This means that they must make available to contracting authorities any data as required and requested to demonstrate payments are made. So just to reinforce some of it that Ahmed was saying about trying to use blockchain for payment tracking. But where else do we see some ideas for policy and regulation? Well, following the recent tragic events in Grenfell, we know that the Hackett report called for a golden thread. And since that report, we have seen the creation of 7 working groups. Some of the topics of these working groups could also help logistics and transportation, such as the Occupation and Maintenance Working Group. They're looking to recommend how owners and regulators can ensure that building and transportation hubs are always safe throughout the life cycle of the building. And blockchain records, as Ahmed previously mentioned, and paperless logistics and data integration and regulation that can help here. And the Products Working Group is determining how product testing and marketing can improve, and tracking materials ownership during deliveries and policies would also help here. So investments that are required in blockchain pilots, we see collaboration with academia, industrial experts and professional institutions, and we see that industry are actually making the first steps in this place, in place of any central investment or guidance. So we're currently working with a few such pilots, both with Ahmed here in the UK and in Europe, as infrastructure clients see the benefit more of this transparent and collaborative approach. So we see countries like UAE have a blockchain charter and commissioning, and even the APP blockchain is a perfect conduit to ensure that the industry and society benefit from potential blockchain. It's webinars such as this, which is great to share the knowledge amongst the industry. So how do we address the blockchain challenges? Well, it's the challenges of transparency and tracking movements between countries. I mean, we saw earlier the one about tracking pallets. It's a great way to track data across the continents. It's very important right now. And in working groups, such as mentioned in the golden thread earlier, consistent with industrial experts, this would accelerate the adoption of blockchain and address the logistics and transportation specific challenges. So in regards to a social and corporate responsibility in blockchain, we know that from these pilots undertaken that blockchain will help the circular economy, because we can track these materials back to the point of use and make sure that when it's embedded in our infrastructure and transportation hubs, put my teeth back in, we can make sure it actually shapes a better world in trust and collaboration. Thanks for listening.
That's great, Kevin, and Ahmed, thank you very much for that. And we'll crack on, because I know that we are just slightly behind time, and those in the UK who have got limited daylight, I'm a wee bit further north, so I've got a wee bit more. We'll be probably looking for their regulated walk today. So we will crack on, and I'm delighted to now introduce Professor Lenny, Director of Advanced Resource Efficiency Centre at the University of Sheffield, a place I used to spend quite a lot of time in. Co-author of concept paper Blockchain Distribution in Transport, Are You Decentralized Yet? And researching in world leading and recognised for scientific novelty and has generated significant impacts for society. So Professor, over to you.
So blockchain definitely has a role to play in the area of logistics and transport. 2 years ago, we published a report in partnership with the Transport System Catapult. I think now it's part of the Digital Catapult, in investigating the potential disruption of blockchain technology in transport and logistics sector. In this report, which is available on the library and resources section on the APPG website on blockchain, and we explore a number of potential application of blockchain in this area. So there are a couple of key highlights in this report. First, it has the potential to really make a huge difference in the area of mobility as a service, mass, freight and logistics, UAV, unmanned aircraft system and vehicle, data sharing, and collaborative digital transport engineering. So I'm going to go through these areas as follows. So mobility as a service is going to be potentially a new way of doing business in the transport and logistics sector. So rather than owning the physical vehicles or fleet of a vehicle, it potentially can move to a more usership-based model, more personalized, and providing an end-to-end transport services. And in that sort of environment, blockchain is needed really to trace the authentication of the entire service in terms of ownership, maintenance of the vehicle, service history, and so on. And this has a great potential in the area of mobility as a service model. Freight and logistics, obviously mobility as a service model is not just about movement of goods in the supply chain, but also about movement of people. There are a lot of examples that have been mentioned by previous speakers in terms of tracking and tracing of products across multi-modality, whether this is road, rail, air, or other transport mechanism. But at the same time, there is also potential application of blockchain in tracing people as well. UAV is another interesting application. There's an increasing interest in the area of electrification in aerospace and in the aviation industry. So in particular, the use of drone, potentially commercial cargo type drones, or smaller drones for rescue services for humanitarian logistics. So especially for drone potential use case in the future, there is a danger that there is illegal activities around important airport. So I think there is a huge potential again for the application of blockchain in determining the legal activities without the need to have specific line of sight of the application of drone in this particular example. Another potential application is data sharing. Obviously, that will relate to the use of standard smart contract, for instance, or data passport. So I think these two areas would have a huge potential in terms of authentication again, and then providing a single version of truth and proof of work. Last but not least, in the area of collaborative digital transport engineering, especially in the transport infrastructure, it is going to become more digital. In a digital economy, blockchain is going to play a significant role. For example, in the Building Information Modeling Program, BIM, and in many other programs as well. So I think given the international nature of the supply chain, and given the complexity of the supply chain where there are multiple SKU, raw material, components, products coming from different ports and different parts of the world, it is very important to ensure that there is an important standard in place to ensure efficient and smooth tracking of our product and to give the level of trust needed for the particular service industry. So I think in terms of blockchain technologies application in transport and logistics is one of the many technology that can be considered. But if we consider blockchain in combination with other technologies such as AI and IoT. So it potentially can contribute to this new idea of technology singularity, whereby smart cities will be connected into a systems, an ecosystem, where data will be shared and in a seamless way with full trust and traceability, and user will have the ownership of the data and in a fully decentralized structure. So I think there is a huge potential there. There are already several industry leaders and players in this field, and a couple of examples have already been mentioned by the previous speakers. And the use cases are increasingly interesting, and increasingly there are a lot of potential financial gain and benefits to users in terms of the application of blockchain in transport and logistics. So in the context of coronavirus, so obviously there is a need and rush to produce and demand and secure new medical equipment, such as ventilators and other important products. Similarly, in the case of food security and food supply chain, authentication is very important, and also for high value items. And last but not least, in the context of Brexit, the idea of managing that trade and efficiency of movement of goods and data and information in different parts of the world across different ports and trade services would be very important. And therefore, I think blockchain can have a significant role to play in this particular area going forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Professor. And you made some serious challenges for the business in terms of connectivity to other types of technologies. Thank you very much indeed. Last but not least is Geoffrey Goodall. Geoffrey, I believe you're on the phone, who's a regular attender of the All-Party Parliamentary Group and a great supporter of its work. And we'll be glad to hear from you. He's a Senior Research Associate in Financial Computing and Analytics at University College London, an Associate of the Centre for Technology and Global Affairs at the University of Oxford. And recent works focuses on private payment systems, digital identity, decentralized marketplaces, and financial regulation. Geoffrey, over to you.
Thank you, Martin. And on this topic, which is really specific to transport and logistics, I want to observe that some of this is going to be a bit of a review of my comments from last time, so I will endeavor to be brief. Now, there's no question that distributed ledgers can benefit the transport and logistics industry. I think that's actually quite clear, and as the many presenters have described over the last few minutes. And really, I think we need to understand why distributed ledgers have this opportunity. I think we need to understand what distributed ledgers are for. And really, I think if I could summarize it succinctly, distributed ledgers are really about establishing a world state, a state of the world that everyone can agree on without agreeing upon a single platform operator or a single particular authority to establish the authenticity of that world state. And let me describe perhaps what our options are when we have this problem, this challenge of establishing world state. Now, one, we can do pairwise reporting and reconciliation. So this is the kind of accounts-based approach, perhaps to draw an analogy to finance. But the problem with that is that it's very expensive. It doesn't really allow the parties at the edges to share global views, and it requires quite a bit of reporting. The alternative, of course, is to have some kind of a shared world state ledger that everyone agrees on. Now, for that, you have two choices. You can either elect a strong centralized party to act as the sort of master or arbiter of the state of the world and the transactions that can change it, or you can create a distributed ledger. And since much of our conversation today has been about distributed ledgers, really what this is about is an ex-ante consensus process for establishing whether a particular change to the world state is legitimate or not before accepting it as a transaction, and for which the transactions are synchronized across all of the participants in the system. So that's what a distributed ledger system is about. Now, the benefits, I would argue, can be arranged into three broad categories. The first category And these are the benefits of choosing a distributed ledger versus a centralized kind of system in which there is an authority that might use a distributed system like a database, but is still a centralized authority. And I think that the opportunities for benefits from a distributed ledger system are really threefold. Number one, the reduction of costs and risks associated with operating a live system and being dependent upon a live system that serves as the master or the arbiter. And I think that this is really important, because if we want to have such a centralized arbiter, we're going to need to concern ourselves with uptime, we're going to need to concern ourselves with contingency plans, we're going to need to concern ourselves with all of the costs for managing the risks of failing to arbitrate in the way that everyone agrees upon. Much of this can be significantly mitigated, potentially, by moving to the distributed model. Second, preventing unilateral action on the part of a single actor or group. So, in other words, less is more. If we have a single unilateral actor, or a single actor who can behave in a unilateral way, we have a host of problems associated with fairness, or changing the rules of the system, or changing the world state in a way that people do not see or cannot detect. We can mitigate these risks as well. And third, creating process transparency and accountability for the participants of the system and for the de facto operators of the system. And this is really a result of the fact that if we use this distributed ledger and this protocol becomes our way of operating, we know that what gets transacted in the system is really limited, potentially, by what is shared on the ledger. And that's a very powerful concept. Now, I'd like to point out that in construction project management, with a nod to Kevin, we actually have another opportunity along these lines that I think falls into, largely falls into the second category, which is the opportunity to link budget to the work plan. And we know that in many cases of major projects, we have a budget and we have a work plan, and they tend not to get linked. And indeed, there is the problem of hiding bad news, as Kevin had mentioned. Now, I want to point out that there is significant work being done in this area by Dr. Chris Clack, who's one of my colleagues at UCL. So this is a very hot topic, and I think that there is quite a bit of opportunity to address construction in particular along the same lines as these other areas. Now, there's the question then of whether this is about industry or whether this is about government. I'd like to suggest that we may actually need a regulatory push to address these collective action problems. In many cases, these problems that entail many different actors give rise to this sort of inclination to operate a platform. And I think that we need to be concerned about platforms because platforms can lead to the ability of a particular actor to exert outsized control. So if we have a regulator who can perhaps set the rules, then we can indeed have the industry lead the implementation. So look at successful co-regulation in the financial industry as an analogy. So with a nod to Jeacocke, government will, I would say, have a big role in these kinds of problems and in laying out the ground rules for how this kind of technology will be applied. Now, there are many questions about that. For example, which regulators are relevant to the transport and logistics industry who would actually have the right positioning in government to make sure that these systems are applied appropriately and completely in these industries. How do we handle cross-border coordination between regulators in different countries? How do we handle multinational firms? How do we handle cross-border disputes? So if someone claims that a particular case was handled inappropriately, who is the right arbitrator from the regulatory perspective, and so on. So I think that there are many different challenges that are going to need to be solved by some kind of arrangements at the treaty level, and this is, I think, going to be a large question going forward in transport and logistics, precisely because of its global interdependence. Now, I think it would be particularly interesting to understand why the IBM Maersk initiative, as I had mentioned last time, had not achieved earlier success. So with a nod to Stewart, who is at IBM TradeLens, I think that the verdict suggests that the technology was good, and there are lots of opportunities indeed to improve business along the lines that Stewart had mentioned. Although I think in the early days of the IBM-Maersk collaboration, I think that there was some evidence that there was some secrecy. I think that there was some evidence that, that there was a concern among other industry participants that this was a private platform that existed for the benefit of IBM and Maersk, rightly or wrongly, rather than the benefit of the entirety of the industry. Now, of course, if it truly were about a benefit to IBM and Maersk, then there really wouldn't be much of an argument for using DLT, because the purpose of having DLT is not having that centralized actor. So I feel like I have to emphasize that this is not a platform, right? So we need to be concerned about evaluating platform-based business models. And when I say not a platform, I'm talking about the business model level, not the idea of a protocol level. This is a protocol, and we can think of a protocol as being a platform, but that's different from a platform in the sort of modern e-commerce sense. I think that there was some suggestion that there was not enough of a multi-stakeholder process. Now, I believe that IBM and Maersk are actually looking to fix this problem, and I think that there are many different efforts in this space that are done by many different actors in international standards and also in a broader effort to achieve a consensus and a diverse stakeholder role in this. So please watch this space. Although I think we need to learn these lessons, and there's a lot to learn from here. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jeff. Because I was just about to say we're very much starting to get behind time, and I have 2 dogs who are demanding their walk, barking behind me at the moment, and that's a difficult situation in the UK. Now, I just want to go straight to the Q&A. We've got a range of questions, and you'll forgive me for one moment as I seek to bring them up. If I can find the first one is from Chia. Could you, this is a general one to all the speakers. The crucial aspect is getting enough traction between the various participants. How did you all get the stakeholders to adopt your solutions? Is there enough room to have so many diverse ecosystems? That's from Tria Verdi from Capita. And if anyone wants to come in, raise their hand and want to come in with that, or want me to repeat. Okay, I'm going to go to Stewart.
Okay, thanks. So I suggest I answer that, and maybe I also answer the question that Robert posed directly to me, because they're very similar, I think, in terms of the answers. So the key thing to the network value and persuading people to join a blockchain network is key. The value of any network, increases dramatically with the different, the numbers of participants that are using it. And we've had quite a lot of experience over the last couple of years about how to drive that uptake, and also some examples of how maybe driving the uptake doesn't work so well. And the really crucial thing is to be able to explain to the organization who's joining, what specific value they are going to get out of joining the network. So if we take TradeLens as an example, the value that you get as a participant in TradeLens varies depending on exactly who you are. So if you are a port, for example, one of your primary drivers is to increase the utilization of your very valuable asset, the berths at the port. And the TradeLens network allows you to do that. If you are a government customs authority, one of the things you really care about is understanding the provenance of the goods, exactly where they came from, exactly where a particular container was stuffed, for example. And in that case, that's the sort of information that the value that you can get from TradeLens. And in return, we, for example, ask that you contribute information about when you've released the containers. If you are a shipper, the value you get is in the real-time insight into what is going on with your shipment and the ability to proactively address things when the unexpected happens. So having that really clear understanding of what it is that the different constituents are going to get from your network is probably the single most crucial thing to driving uptake of it and to getting people to join that network.
Okay, thank you, Stuart. And just anyone else, just one more I'll bring in, and if Bejoy, if you want to come in, that would be great. That was asked
sure.
on that.
Thank you. The question here is the use case, right? So at the end of the day, what are we trying to achieve? The pain point of a customer, whoever the customer is, whether it's a shipper, consignee, any part of the logistics chain. So we need to understand, are we trying to solve the problem of the customer? That means we have to go to the business processes. And how can you ease the process? You have to go to KPIs, which they use. Leave the technology out, go to the business process, get down with the customer. And we have seen this use case. If you go to YouTube and see how BMW and DHL has worked together to create ease of use of seamless movement of parts to different parts of Asia by DHL, and now it's being used by many other partners for BMW. So what we did is we went through, did a walkthrough of the current process. We understood the problems, and then we tried to find out immediate quick wins and also see an end goal. This creates confidence in the customer. And then at the end of the day, we use blockchain. That technology is behind the scene, but we need to focus on the customer's promise, our customer's needs, and fulfill that. And the time of achieving this is so important because the customer has less patience. So we need to have quick wins, short wins, and long-term wins. Blockchain is a technology where you can step up slowly. You do not need all the participants. You can start with on-behalf service. For example, a carrier can give information from a terminal operator until the terminal operators are in. So you need to step up slowly and show the customer that the value creation is consistent and also achievable on a long term.
Okay, thank you very much, Bejoy. This next question is for both Ahmed and Kevin, and it's from Matthew van Niekerk. In the construction industry, there are a number of centralized solutions that seem quite integral, Traxel, Roto, Rplan, and there's others. In his local market for issues around document and information flows, how do you position your solutions vis-a-vis such centralized third-party solutions?
I'm not sure I fully understand the question.
Let me try and reread it again. Yeah, I'll just kind of get to, I think there's issues around document and information flow. And how does your solutions, they say vis-a-vis such centralized third-party solutions? How do you go over kind of?
Yeah, since 2011, there's been a lot of work done on creating the best practice process, and central to that is the use of a common data environment where everybody checks in their data into a central repository of information and checks it out, so everybody knows, what's the latest revision of a particular design document or piece of information. What we've actually done is we are not tearing that up because we think that is best practice, and so we're building a process around that, and the process is to link through to that documentation so that when you receive an email from someone, there is a unique ID, a hash for techies out there, that tells you the ID of the document that you're referring to in the transaction that you're performing. So we're not looking to supersede or kind of get rid of or throw away good work that's been carried out over the last 10 years. We're looking to enhance it. So hopefully that answers the question. So we're actually linking to a central repository of data, and that reinforces a strategy for the UK government, which is about digital built Britain, all the data held in secure locations but centrally. So we're trying to build on top of instead of replace.
Okay, and Kevin, you don't need to come in, or do you want to come in there? Or yeah, you go. Yeah.
Yeah, another thing that's good about the Construction Smart Contracts Committee is it's a real end-to-end thought process. So when we looked at it first, we were looking at different parts within the centre of construction, but it's important that within construction, it starts from when the design takes place, and then it works through to a contract. It's very hard to change stuff on a construction site if it's not already written to contract. So what we started to do, we started to look at the digital specification. Can you assign that specification to a blockchain, and can that data flow through a construction process and be used the whole way through? We found that if you structure your data at the beginning, have a digital specification that can be assigned to blockchain, that information can be used during construction, but its most important information will be used at the circular economy at the end of life. So it's almost like if you embed EPD data, the environmental product data, into that specification, it becomes almost like a reverse of an IKEA manual. So you can deconstruct your building and put all those components to reuse, and that is sort of like a game changer. The Construction Smart Contracts Committee looked at it from end to end as a process. We're not trying to compete with people in between for different solutions. We were looking at, because we've got the likes of ARUP, we've got HS2, we've got suppliers, we've got providers. We've looked at the whole chain throughout from start to finish, and looked, personally, I put our opinion in there about how we would like things added to the specification, and that be assigned to a blockchain to be used throughout the in-use period and the recycle period on a project. So, and others added their part, and I think that's where the true value came in that one, using the data to its best ability.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm just hoping you can all hear me, because I'm having to plug in my iPad because I'm starting to run out of energy. I know there are a range of questions. I'm just very conscious of time. What it would be is my intention, this is where you have the ability as the chair, is to say that you will get your answers, but sadly not live tonight. They will be answered and we will share through the webinar. But I know, Fernando, you had a final question that was to be put, if you wanted to come in just now.
Yeah, hello. This is the final question. I mean, the rest of the questions we can find in the Q&A will be answered in the next week in our Twitter account, in the APPG Twitter account. And I would like to have a question for Professor Lenny from Matthew Van Nierke, who says, in the past 4 years, there have been a lot of innovation in the international trade on chain, with more than 40 separate initiatives on blockchain. For instance, in trade finance, how do you see interoperability of these multiple initiatives for tracking on various protocols evolving? It's a question about interoperability for you, Professor Lenny, please.
Thank you. Yes, I'm looking at the Q&A. So yes, recently there are really a huge increase of interest and R&D in this particular area, and there is no such international standard yet. But there are ongoing work by the BSI, the British Standard Institute, and also ISO communities in trying to establish some sort of a standards for blockchain. So that probably will also be relevant for the finance sector, but also in other sectors as well. So watch the space in this particular area. There are so many different DLT provider in supply chain finance that use blockchain as the underpinning technology. Not just in the UK, but globally. So therefore, the need for these international standards and guideline is needed.
Thank you. Now, I know that, as I said, we are conscious of time and we are now a bit over now. I was looking to maybe bring, with the panel's agreement, matters to a conclusion. But before I do, I wonder if Professor Birgitte Andersen maybe wants to say a few words before we bring matters to an end for this evening at all. Birgitte, over to you.
Thank you very much. Okay, so now I just want to say here when we're concluding here, it's been a fantastic conversation. I was thinking we at the APPG blockchain also have a blockchain for government council, and what became very clear, I think, during the presentations was the need for, particularly in the area of public procurement, but clearly also in general, to think some kind of general guidelines for procurement in the areas of operational excellence of a product, blockchain, service excellence of the users, and of course product excellence, because a major aspect when I have attended round table of government has been really what to put in the public procurement guidelines and what good looks like, and that's not just clear for the public procurement department and the cabinet office. And I think that the industry needs to help here with what good looks like. So that would have been my question in these areas. But I really enjoyed tonight, and the next meetings are also going to be in this fashion here. So we will meet again online, maybe with different panels and different teams, but thank you very much.
Birgitte, thank you very much indeed. And can I just thank the panel, the advisory board, and also for your team at the Big Innovation Centre for getting this all set up. I think, I think also the APPG and blockchain that you facilitate, the update on AI, did the exact same yesterday. And I think we're setting the standard for how you can have participation and democracy without buildings. This is quite an interesting standard to discuss. Again, we live in very difficult times. I want to thank you all for being here with us tonight, and to thank all our listeners as well, and contributors through questions. We have an old saying in Scotland in what we call the ancient, Slanches sonus agus beatus, health, happiness and peace, especially in the times in which we live. And I wish you all a very good night, and hope to see you and talk to you all very soon indeed. Thank you, and good night, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.